Hello, my name is Darren Thomas, and I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. And this is Simpler Using Machine Learning Algorithms in R. And so now we are in Lesson 4.2. We're in Chapter 4, Lesson 2. And we're going to do our data preparation for our lasso regression. So let's go ahead and move over to R. So I'm in R, and my code is over here in the upper left-hand part, the script area. And so we have primarily three packages that we're going to be using in this one. The mass package is where we're getting our data set from, NL schools. The library core plot, the core plot is for visualization purposes in this particular lesson, and the GLM net is where we're going to get our lasso regression algorithm from. So we just press Control Enter to get this information going in line number 1. Our data set is called NL schools. Now, in case you're wondering a little bit, if you want to know a little bit more about NL schools, just type this question mark, and it's 8th grade pupils in the Netherlands. So we have things like their language score, their IQ, what class they're in, a factor variable, class size, and social economic status. So these are kind of the things that are in that variable. So our primary goal as we use the lasso algorithm is that we want to predict their language test score. That is our goal that we want to do in this particular chapter, this particular unit. So then I'm going to set my seed to try to get consistent results, and if I type in the str function, this is what I get. So this is kind of what I explained to you. Now, just looking at this, something suspicious is happening. We have a class variable here, and it has 133 levels. So it's probably not very useful for our purposes. So we're probably going to have to remove that. And this last variable down here, now because we're using the GLM net package, the library GLM net, we're going to have to convert some stuff into matrices and separate the independent and dependent variables. We did this in the previous chapter, so this should not be too difficult, but just a heads up for right now. So why don't we go ahead and do our data visualization. So one thing I want to do is I want to remove the class variable because it has 133 levels. And that's just kind of weird in my experience. Oops, press Control Enter. Now we're going to set up and do our correlational plot. So what we're going to do here is that you need to look carefully. So I'm going to make an object called p.core, and then also I'm going to use the function core here, and I'm going to use the NL school, but I'm going to tell it to remove the 5th variable. That's what I wanted to do. And so by removing the 5th variable, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm removing the comb variable at the very bottom because remember, comb is a factor variable, and we can't have that in the correlational plot. So I press Control Enter for line 8, Control Enter for line 9, and you can see here I have my correlational plot right here off to your right. And if I zoom in a little bit to help you out to see, you can see that none of the correlations are that bad. We have a high correlation between language and IQ. That's to be expected. The correlation between IQ and GS is so low you can't even see it, but it's actually a 0.03 right there. And down here at the bottom we have some relatively low correlations. So it does not appear that we have any concerns with correlations at this particular moment. So now that we're done with that, and again you can explore this more making histograms and checking other things, but again we're focused on learning the algorithms in this particular course and video. Now, almost wrapping this up, I need to make my train and test sets. And so this code right here, you saw this in the previous video, and that's the beauty of using things like R. You could just rerun code over and over again and just kind of change out the things that you need to change out. And so we're going to make a vector, if you will, called IND, and we're going to sample it 1, 2, 1, 2. 30 with the number of rows based on the number of rows in the NL schools data set. Yes, with replacement. So if you use up the 1, you can use the 1 again. If you use the 2, you can use the 2 again. And the probability, you've seen this before, 70% 1s, 30% 2s. So I'm going to go ahead and run that. And so now I can make my train set. What's happening is that, and again, I've explained this before, we're going to map the IND vector to NL schools so that because they have the same number of rows, wherever there is a 1 in the same row, we're going to put that in the train set. And wherever there's a 2, we're going to map that to the test set. We talked about this before. Now, the last piece of information we have to do here is convert the factor variables. As I mentioned before, the COMB or the comb variable is a factor. We have to deal with that. And so what we're doing this time that is slightly different, I guess it's not slightly different, but what we're doing this time is that we're dealing with the factor variable at the same time, instead of rather than when we kind of split it apart in the last chapter. So again, you should know this code already. We use the model.matrix, the tilde sign, comb, 1. This is all argument that you have to set. You can, of course, use question mark and type in model.matrix to figure out what exactly is happening here. And we tell it the data set is trained. So I do this twice for line 18 and line 19. And so the last thing in lines 20 and 21 is we have to separate the variables that we are using as the explanatory variables or the predictive variables. We have to separate that from the outcome variable or the dependent variable. That's what we're doing with line 20. Line 20, we're taking all the predictive variables and putting them in their own data set. And so if you look closely, let me see here. Our very first variable is language in the data set. So this is going to be our Y data set, if you will. And like I said in the last video, if you are familiar with Python, this is very, very common. And it is unique to the GMLnet. Many other algorithms don't require this. Many other functions don't require this, but it is what it is. So I press Control Enter, I press Control Enter, and essentially we're done. Everything that we've done here is going to help us to actually develop our model in the next video. So in this video, all we did was prepare and set up our data for our further analysis. We went in here, we did a quick little visualization by looking at the correlations. There was no problems there. Then we set up our training test set by making the IND vector, and then we mapped the IND results to the NL schools and made our train and our test. And so you can probably tell that 70% of our data is in the train, 30% is in the test. And then lastly, we dealt with our factor variables. And then not lastly, but then finally the very last thing that we did was we separated our predictive variables from our dependent variable, which in this case is language scores. So I hope this was useful for you, and I hope that you're able to continue with us and check out the next video. My name is Darren Thomas. I'm the Director of Educational Research Techniques, and this is simpler using machine learning algorithms in R. Thank you. Take care.